You are watching a video in the Woodlawn series. We sat down with a number of individuals who either worked in, lived in, or invested in the Woodlawn neighborhood. From those conversations, we hope to learn from and learn about Woodlawn.
Welcome, everybody. Again, my name is David Helm. I'm the senior pastor of Christ Church, Chicago. Recently purchased what was St. John the Baptist Temple on the northwest corner of 62nd and Woodlawn. We are renovating it and look to be in there in the fall of 2021. You can find more out about us at christchicago.org. Well, this is episode of Woodlawn, learning from and learning about. I have been looking forward to. We have the privilege of speaking today with Ghian Foreman. He's a Chicagoan. He's a lifelong South Sider. He's a Whitney Young grad. He's got his MBA from the University of Chicago Booth School of Business. Beyond that, presently, he's the CEO of the Emerald South Economic Development Collaborative. And if that's not enough, he's serving our city as the president of the Chicago Police Board, so he's well aware and acquainted with what things are going on the South Side. Ghian, it is great to have you. Welcome.
Thank you. Excited to be here virtually with you.
Yeah. Hey, tell us a little about your growing up, because you're a local kid, and many of us have raised our families here as well. And what are the formative influences upon you that have kind of shaped you into who you are today?
Yeah, well, I grew up in the Hyde Park and Kenwood neighborhoods, kind of all over the neighborhood, a little bit every place, played ball on every basketball court within a 2-mile radius and ran track in Washington Park and Jackson Park. I was a city champ in cross country. And so, I literally ran these streets. Right over by where you guys are building the church now. Man, I got a bike stolen over there. I'm still looking for that bike. I really like that bike.
Hey, man, you're not the only one that had a bike stolen over there.
No, but, kind of grew up in the neighborhood. I went to Whitney Young for high school. I worked at Mr. G. So if any of your parishioners are familiar with the Hyde Park neighborhood, I grew up bagging their groceries probably at Mr. G's.
Wow.
I attended Florida A&M University on a full business scholarship. Worked in a variety of telecommunications, but several internships. And then after undergrad, worked in telecommunications. Later went to University of Chicago for business school, Booth School of Business. Afterwards, I worked in banking at Household and HSBC. And real estate investor. I've been investing in real estate since I was 17 years old. So own and invested and rehabbed a lot of properties in the Chicago South Side of Chicago. And for the last 9 years, I ran an organization called Greater Southwest Development Corporation on the southwest side of the city, focused on economic development. And for the last year, I've been at Emerald South Economic Development Collaborative, which is a new organization that's focused on the neighborhood surrounding the future Obama Center and thinking about how our communities can benefit from the influx of dollars and opportunities that comes along with the Obama Center locating in our neighborhood.
And I'm so glad you're with that. And I know you've been there a year, and I know Arnie Duncan has walked into that world as well. And I know that you guys are working on commercial corridor expansion. You're working on sustainable housing. You're working on workforce development, ways to bring resilient communities to the city. You mentioned the Obama Center. Let's start there. Just tell us again, how's that proceeding at this point? It's been in the papers, out of the papers, in the courts, out of the courts. Just give us a present status as we're talking here. What are we now? We're in May of 2020.
Sure.
And what are you encouraged by in the process, and where do you think we're at the
I think that I've always been encouraged, right? I don't think I've ever thought, oh man, this isn't going to happen. The opportunity is a once in a lifetime opportunity. The Obamas thought very carefully about where they were going to put the center, because this will be something that, hundreds of years from now, people will come visit, and our community, people will be coming to visit our community, right? And so how do we take advantage of that? So yes, there's been a series of lawsuits, and I think that those are proceeding, but there also were a series of federal reviews that had to take place. And I believe that we're nearing the close of some of those reviews. Feedback has been given, and I believe that their team is making the necessary adjustments. Jackson Park itself is in a historic park.
Right.
So in order to make changes to that park, any significant changes to that, you have to go through 106 process. It's a federal review. So the Obama Foundation has been very diligent in terms of going through that, making sure that they get feedback from the community, from local stakeholders. And so I believe it's proceeding in a really good way. And hopefully we have a groundbreaking in the next few months.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate that, because so many people, when they at least hear your voice, they'll feel like they're a little closer to where it might actually be at the moment. You mentioned the community, and I know that the community benefits agreement has been a big piece here in Woodlawn and in other places. Tell us a little bit about what's encouraged you about that process, because that's where some tensions hit. What's encouraged you about that process? What does it say about community development that's in play? Where do you think we're at with it right now? But even more broadly, because you're interested in economic development over the next 25 years, what challenges and encouragements come to you when you see the community and that particular issue? What does it speak to at a larger level?
Yeah. So first of all, there's nothing that discourages me about the fact that there's a want for a community benefits agreement. What that says to me is that the community is saying, hey, wait a minute, I don't want something done to me. I want to be a part of this. So regardless of what side of the fence someone lays on, the details, the fact that people are willing to step up, be engaged in something that absolutely impacts not only their lives and today, but their lives in the future, their kids' lives, their grandchildren's lives. I love that, right? And I think that this becomes an opportunity for us to try to figure out, what do we agree upon? What do we have in common? When we really sit down and think about those things, we have a lot more in common, things that we want than what we don't want. So that's where I'm really encouraged, because that's, if we focus on those things, right? Really what the community is saying is that we want opportunities. We want to be able to continue to live in the neighborhood, right? If there are jobs coming to the neighborhood, we want to participate. We don't want to be moved out, right? And so these are all valid points. Whether or not a CBA is the right tool to accomplish that, that's up for debate, right? But what people want, absolutely everyone can agree with that. So I'm really encouraged by that. I'm not exactly sure where we are currently as far as that. I know that affordable housing was one of the topics, and I think that there was an affordable housing ordinance that was introduced. Thinking of ways how that legislatively can have an impact. I think there's still some things that legislatively we'll never be able to accomplish. It's going to be up to us in community to figure out how do we accomplish some of these things, right? And there are a lot of different models one can use, cooperative housing, or there's a ton of models that exist. Landing on the right one or two or three is the place where I think that we still have some work to do.
Well, and one of the things I love about you is you're the optimist, you're bullish, your encouragement, and that's probably one of the factors of your own leadership style and being able to bring people together. We're grateful for you on that. One of the things that seems like we might have an advantage in the present climate, it isn't just outside developers in contrast to community citizens or a community that stands apart or wondering if they're going to share in the benefits of the Obama Center, but you've got the Obama Center, which is a massive capital investment. You've got development, which of course you have a lot of history on economic development, but the city seems to be a major player as well. And so the city seems to be at a place with all of land and what's happening to be able to come in and help to bring some of the equilibrium and balance that might build a better community. Any thoughts on just the multitude of angles? You have citizens, you have the Obama Center, you've got the city itself, and you've got outside developers. The fact that you've got 4 rather than 2 of those 4 might lend for a better outcome?
Yeah, so I would phrase it a different way. I would say anchors that we have, right? We have the University of Chicago, the Museum of Science and Industry. We have Cook County Hospital, Providence Cook County Hospital. There's a new project going there. We have incredible CTA access, right? Red line, green line. We have Metra. We have the people. Some people look at this and say, oh, look at the community. It's all of this vacant land. That's an asset. On a balance sheet, that would be an asset. If we look at it as a liability, right? If you go to Lincoln Park right now, they don't have that asset. Not having vacant land actually is a liability to them. So some of it is we have to kind of reframe our thoughts in terms of what we actually have. If we think from an asset-based perspective, I think that our thinking totally shifts, and we're able to see different kinds of possibilities. Rather than thinking about what's wrong, we can think about what we have and how we accomplish something that we want to get to. So absolutely, that's kind of how I'm thinking about it.
So to that point, which I love that, because people see vacant land, they see generations of disinvestment. What you see when you see vacant land is opportunity for not only just economic development, but for the rebuilding and reshaping of the community.
Yes.
Let's take the Obama Center then on the east. Let's take the redeveloped economic development, Cottage Grove and 63rd, okay, with the CTA. You run a mile stretch in between. There's a lot of vacant land between Woodlawn Avenue and 63rd. How are you going to get these hundreds of thousands of people that might visit the Obama Center engaged in staying in the community? And is there any plans on that kind of development stretch on 63rd that will bridge the distance between public transportation and where people might be thinking that they're going by way of destination?
Yeah, so I think that a lot of this historically is the kind of thing that we depend on the city of Chicago and Department of Planning to come up with. Hey, here's the ideas.
Yeah.
We depend on a private developer to say, here's the building I'm going to build. I think that we kind of have a unique opportunity right now because of the land ownership structures there, because of the city involvement, because of the community-driven process that we've been through now a couple of times in the neighborhood, one with the building on 63rd and Cottage, the old bank building, where community came together and said what they wanted. I think that we have the opportunity right now to kind of define what it is. If you've ever been to the Smithsonian in DC, you don't drive your car right up to the museum and get out and walk in. No, you have to park your car far away, or you take a cab, or you do something else. And so we now have the opportunity to say we have this incredible asset of a CTA station terminating at 63rd and Cottage Grove. It's a short walk, maybe a half a mile to Stony Island. What kinds of things would a tourist want to do? Maybe they want to hear some old Chicago blues, so maybe we need a place that's there. Maybe they want Chicago house music. Maybe they want to try a Chicago hot dog, buy a t-shirt. So these are the kinds of things I think that we as a community should be thinking about. What will be the value add that we can bring to the community? What is that process, right? We have some time. This is going to be a big capital project. It's going to take some time for it to get built. So we do have some runway to start thinking about the types of businesses that we want to have to be able to service these million visitors a year. And how do you get the skill set to actually operate that business in an efficient way?
Well, this is where, Chicago keeps rebuilding itself. I remember, of course, when the Metro tracks, the elevated tracks ran between 63rd and Cottage all the way to Stony.
Yeah.
And then all those came down. What you're saying is, if that can be repopulated in ways that people kind of productively crawl and sit and spend, there's an opportunity for people to flourish along that new corridor.
That's exactly right.
Any other corridors in the Woodlawn area or the Obama Center that you're like, this is another important thing that just a common person might not be aware of yet as far as what the future opportunity might hold?
Yeah, I mean, without singling out a single one, I mean, I think that, the north, south, and east, west, I think certainly the corridors that lead to transit are really important, right? As we see now in a COVID-19 time frame where we're not driving as much and that kind of thing, and we're seeing direct impacts that it's having on the environment, I think the reliance on public transportation or alternate means of transportation are going to be really important. And so that's a part of what we have to kind of figure out. So Cottage Grove, certainly, a lot of investment taking place right there at that corner of 63rd and Cottage Grove. POA built a new development, and Daly's, which has been around, a restaurant that's been around since the Columbian Exposition, was hosted here in Chicago. They moved and have a great new location. So how do you build upon the momentum that's already there? King Drive, there's lots of opportunities. And then, you can start even look at some of the smaller streets, 61st Street. How do you take advantage of that? What's happening on Stony Island? You have the Arts Bank building with Theaster Gates and some other things. So
that's
how do we
beautiful.
take advantage of all of these? What does Stony Island look like? Maybe it doesn't look the same as it looks today. How do you look at Hyde Park, the neighbor to the north? How do you look at them as a symbiotic partner? Not a partner, not a neighborhood that's going to, where if someone comes to the Obama Center or to the Museum of Science and Industry, we want to attract some of those people to come into the neighborhood, not necessarily just go back home or just go into Hyde Park. So how do we work with that community effectively?
So I want to talk about that because I think you have a unique perspective on this because you grew up in the neighborhood. So you're well aware, even though you're wearing the colors there of the Booth School, you're well aware that the University of Chicago has been both the economic engine, but also, from some people's perspective, the 800-pound gorilla.
Absolutely.
And so there's a sense, and it also have the history of Woodlawn, where now some people are going to view the University of Chicago with all of its capital investment as encroaching, rather than, as you're speaking about, being a collaborative, essential partner in what the economic development and the commercial development will look like. How do you arrive at that view, or what would you say to the individual who spent a lot of time in Woodlawn or South Shore thinking that, well, it's really town against gown. It's the university against the community. It's the community that needs to lead. What's your vantage point on that, or what would you say? Because you've certainly listened to that conversation your whole life.
Yeah. I've been married for 22 years.
Amen. Hey, congratulations.
Thank you. And what I found is that during the times when we communicate really well, things are good. In the times when we don't communicate well, it's less good, right? And so I think that this is a function of communicating. The university isn't going anyplace. And at one point, there was historically talks about the university leaving the neighborhood, right? So if we are worried about them and their negative impact, what would happen if they were not here, right? It's the largest employer. We have incredible healthcare, incredible education, opportunity, and research. But if the community doesn't know how they fit into that, right, what good does it do? Right. And so a part of it is for us to be able to say, hey, what are the opportunities, university? Let us be a value add partner and vice versa. And so I think that those are the kinds of conversations that it's important to have. I think those conversations are taking place. They probably have been taking place over time as well. But in any relationship, there are ups and downs, and over time you have to think. But if the community kind of has a plan, if we know that you're building something on 62nd and Woodlawn, and somebody else is rehabbing the church that had a fire, a couple of blocks away, and somebody else is doing this vacant land. If we put all these things together and say, how does this help Woodlawn, and how does Woodlawn impact Hyde Park? And you start to see how these things fit together. What we tend to do is think about the things in isolation.
Yeah.
And so I think if we think about, you ever see on National Geographic, it's a cow in Africa, and it's a little bird that sits on his back.
Right.
The bird eats the bugs, right? So you're thinking, why don't the cow just shake them off, right? Well, the bird eats the bugs, and so they help each other. And so that's how I think we have to kind of think about this. Not necessarily a total reliance one upon the other, but it's a symbiotic relationship.
That's fantastic. Let me press into it a little more, and I'm not trying to put you in places you don't want to be. But
please go for it. Go for it.
So the building we just purchased a year ago, and we're getting ready to renovate, is on the northwest corner of 62nd and Woodlawn. So I feel like as the pastor of that place, we've got the University of Chicago just off our back shoulder. Mm-hmm. And we've got this rich legacy of African-American life really as a gateway to a larger South Side. So you have an opportunity on the South Side, given even the racial mix of our communities right now, mm-hmm. to do something distinctive that a lot of places don't have that geographic ability. You've spent some time, where I'm going with this is you spent some time with the Chicago Police Board and accountability. You're aware of the situation, both of just race and one's perspective on community treatment, on law enforcement. Talk to us a little bit about how we could help ourselves as it relates to the racial tensions of Chicago's South Side, and then also the law enforcement and community tensions that we've seen. You have a unique position, and as the mayor has appointed you, where did these things collide? What would you have to say to us, given our new context on the issues of race and on the issues of Chicago's history as it relates to law enforcement? I know those are two distinct things, but I'd like to hear both of them.
Racial is a tough one, right? I think that this is something that the country is dealing with. I think it's something our city is dealing with. I've kind of lived all over the country and spent a lot of time all over the world, and very rarely do you see stark contrasts. This is a black neighborhood, this is a white neighborhood, this is a Mexican neighborhood, this is, on and on. So race is a little bit different. But again, I kind of go back to something I talked about earlier. I think if we want to solve some of that, it's easier to think about what we have in common. So this summer, over at one of the real estate developments that I did, we had like a potluck for the community. We had artists come in from other cities, other countries, and one thing that we all kind of have in common is food, right? You got a recipe that your grandmother made really well, and if I tasted that, it's probably very similar to something my aunt made. And so now we found something that we have in common, right? Right now, we all got no haircuts in common. So
man, my hair's looking bad. I can't believe it. I kind of wish we weren't recording this because it's going to look bad for a long time.
But we're all in the same boat. So when we start to think about the things that we have in common, we start to break down some of those things, right? And we start to find ways of how to communicate. There's some things that I'll never understand about the way you grew up, and some things you'll never understand. And it's probably not worth my time to make you understand. But if we focus on the things that we know that we want, right? And one of the basic things that I kind of always talk about is the basics. If we just focus on the fact that we want the basics, what's the basics? Food, clothing, shelter, education, and the chance for our kids to do a little bit better than we did. Who doesn't want that?
Right.
Who doesn't want that, right? And so there's a whole different conversation that we can have about equality, right? But equity means I can eat tonight. Maybe I'm not eating, a big steak, but I get to eat. And right now there's some people who don't get to eat. That's not equity. So how do we do that? As far as police community relations.
Yeah, how we doing on that? Where we've been over the last 2-3 years, and where do you see us going over the next 2 or 3?
Yeah, so I think that we started to see incidents around the country of police violence, and that painted a really bad picture. So let me back up with this. So the Chicago Police Board, what we're responsible for, we're an independent agency appointed by the mayor, but we're an independent agency, and we're to do two primary things. One, we oversee the most serious of discipline cases for police officers. That's anywhere from something that's a suspension for 30 days and above, all the way up to they could be fired. And then the other thing we do is we select the candidates that we present to the mayor, or of which the mayor chooses the superintendent of police. So that period, especially Laquan McDonald, we went through that. The city, it was a real polarizing time. We had the things that happened in Missouri and across the country, New York, Texas, kind of all over. The Black community would say this is not something new. This didn't just happen. This has been happening. And so as a result, we're under a consent decree now, as are some other cities. And this consent decree is not meant to be punitive. It's meant to say, how do we improve the system? So for one thing for sure is that we are seeing civic participation, civic engagement into making that process better, right? And some of that process is directly within changing rules within the police department or the police board or COPA, things like that. And then the other is just trying to think about training, things like that. How does the community relate? And so while we were doing the superintendent search, I did something pretty unique. Rather than just the 9 of us board members kind of saying, okay, this is what we think, we had over 25 meetings with different community groups across the city. And we listened. What is it that you want? Yeah. And the thing is, the answers were consistent. I spoke with probably 15 aldermen individually. The answers were consistent, right? We want unity. We don't want the police to be seen as the police and then the community. Police members are part of the community. They have to live in the city, right? They are neighbors, right? And so if we look at each other as, man, this person wants the same as me. Are there bad police officers? Sure. They're bad lawyers, bad doctors, bad accountants, bad painters, right? Bad men, right? And so when we look at that, well, for us to paint a picture across the board, it's tough. I understand the community's perspective, but at the same time, if my house gets broken into, I'm calling 911, regardless of how I feel about the police. So, but a part of what I heard when I spoke with community, when I spoke with police officers is that police officers don't want to be seen as villains. So I try to lead by example. And I don't go to a police officer and say, yeah, I'm the president of the police board. I say, good morning. Thank you, officer, for your hard work, right? And they're like, man, thank you. I really appreciate that, right? And how they react and how they respond back to us, right? I recognize in some communities that's harder than in others, right? Because of their lived experience. I too, at one point, lived that experience, and I just kind of made the decision, I'm not going to be subject to it. And so I just kind of changed my attitude about it. And this is what I encourage others, including police officers. And so I think that is something we have to work at. It's not something that we didn't get in this situation overnight. We're not going to get out of it overnight, but we have to continue to work at it for the good of the whole city.
That's great. Let me go ahead and ask you a question.
All right.
So Ghian, you take our little project down there at 62nd and Woodlawn. Talk to us about that place, what you think about that kind of opportunity, a church in that neighborhood. You got anything for us on that?
Yeah. Actually, I do. So again, kind of growing up in the neighborhood, right? And kind of seeing where you guys sit. 61st is kind of like the cutoff line. This is Hyde Park and the university, and this is Woodlawn. But truthfully, that little stretch between 61st and 63rd is kind of like a good mixture.
Yeah.
University-related people, community people. So you guys and Woodlawn is the middle point, really, right? So you guys are at a good point to kind of say, hey, look, man, yeah, we're a church, but man, we also have this kind of program, that kind of program, something that appeals to community, something that appeals to university, something that appeals to everybody, kind of be that place, right? Now, remember, and I'm not going to say this as good as you could say it, but Jesus, man, he could go outside and get 2 or 3 people and say, this is church. So
right.
How you utilize that building, that location to be the thing that kind of bring people together. Like if you add something to some soup to thicken it up a little bit, that's what your location has the opportunity to do. Plus, it's a beautiful historic building, right? What you guys are going to do to the building is going to attract people, right? If it's a pretty flower growing, people are going to go look at the pretty flower, and that's what your building is, and it has the ability to kind of really be that fertilizer for the rest of the neighborhood.
Wow, thanks, man. Thanks for thinking of us in that way, and we think it's an incredible opportunity. We've rented space for 22 years.
Okay.
And, we watched this thing unfold, and I feel just like you do. I feel like it's an opportunity of a lifetime, and we really feel like we're renovating it for the next 50 years of gospel service. So
that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Ghian Foreman, what a conversation. You are a gift to the city, and I'm sure you get it from all sides. But it is just a pleasure to meet someone whose life has been invested in the South Side, whose convictions are for the welfare of our city, whose time is given to the citizenry. We want to thank you, and I want to especially thank you for being with us today on Woodlawn, learning from and learning about.
It's my pleasure.